Yeah, but there are many levels to understand that. You can understand it with your intellect, and you can understand it because you are that. And that's a very different place to act politically. It's like Mahatma Gandhi said, when you make yourself into zero, your power becomes invincible. Now, any politician or anybody in the life of trying to institute social change in society would like to have their power be invincible. But it only happens when you aren't, but it is. And that's the one that is really hard, that you have to, in a way, die into not my but thy will for that kind of potential impact on social change.
Kindred souls, as we begin, we take a moment to honor the foundational hearts, the ones who saw the need for the sanctuary and dared to plant the seed. We acknowledge every hand that has tended this garden, from the first whispered idea to the vibrant evolution we sit in today. To those who began this group, your seva has created a clearing in the woods where we can finally breathe. Today, we honor that service by being fully present. We recognize that our collective strength is built upon your individual commitment to self-seva, the quiet daily practice of returning to your own heart. Because you chose to work on yourselves, we have a place to work together. We are here, we are seen, and we are home. Walking each other home into the new year. So welcome, kindred souls, to our second gathering of 2026. As we settle into the sanctuary, take a moment to be here now, centering yourself in the loving awareness that brought us together today. We gather as a community that honors individual differences and celebrates the full spectrum of gender and sexuality. Ram Dass reminded us that we must have a strong sense of who we are before we can engage in social action. And this affinity group provides that essential, inclusive environment to explore our shared experiences, soul to soul. As we step into the new year, we are evolving our practice. We are moving deeper into the spirit of mutuality, recognizing that every person in this circle is both a giver and a receiver. In the tradition of Pure Run Warm Lines, we are here to offer a listening ear and emotional support, not to fix or cure one another. We adopt a trauma-informed lens, shifting our focus from what is wrong to what is strong, and most importantly, what is happening right here, right now. We rest in the three C's. We did not cause each other's struggles, we cannot cure them, and we cannot change anyone's path, but we can, with unconditional love, walk each other home. The invitation for 2026. This year, we invite you to be more than a participant. We invite you to be a co-creator. While our structure is molded after the Love, Serve, Remember guidelines, this is an open space for your direction and your voice. Everyone is invited to propose an idea for a future session or project. You're encouraged to seek the support of others here to implement your vision. Our community Zoom account and YouTube account is open to you for meetings or creative endeavors. Ideas can be submitted directly to Jacqueline or shared openly in our sessions. Before we begin our reading from How Can I Help, let us hold space for the mystery of what we will create together this year. Let us engage with lightness, joy, and the brave honesty of the heart. As we prepare to leave each digital sanctuary, we offer our deepest gratitude to the co-creators and pioneers who continue to sustain this space. Your service is a living prayer. We dedicate the merit of this gathering to the journey of every soul present. As you return to your individual paths, remember that your greatest act of seva is the kindness you show yourself. May you continue your self-seva with the same devotion you give to this group. We release the stories shared here into the vault of confidentiality. We leave the roles of helper and helped behind, returning to the simplicity of being. Go gently, knowing you are never truly walking alone. Namaste. And to our foundational co-creators, there is a specific kind of bravery required to bridge that. Sorry, there. My bad. There is a specific kind of bravery required to build a bridge that has never existed before. By combining the teachings of loving awareness with the principles of intentional peer support, you didn't just start a group. You initiated a shift of how our two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, queer, questioning, intersex, and asexual, plus allies and everyone else community experiences spirituality. So we thank you for your vision, seeing the interaction where our identities and our souls meet. Your courage navigating the grist of organizational growth with a quiet mind, and your self-seva for every hour you spend in meditation and therapy or in nature, because that inner work is what makes the outer work possible. You've taught us that to love, serve, and remember is not a burden, but a joy when shared in mutuality. We honor your path, we celebrate your service, and we stand on the shoulders of your love. Ram Ram. Hi, everybody. My name is Angus Wright, and I also go by Angus by Design, and I'm a fellow student, a fellow explorer, and a participant in these groups. This is chapter 2 from How Can I Help by Ram Dass and Paul Gorman, Stories and Reflections on Service. Chapter 2, Who's Helping? In the early stages of my father's cancer, I found it very difficult to know how best to help. I lived 1,000 miles away and would come for visits. It was hard seeing him going downhill, still feeling so clumsy, not sure what to do, not sure what to say. Towards the end, I was called to come suddenly. He'd been slipping. I went straight from the airport to the hospital, then directly to the room he was listed in. When I entered, I saw that I'd made a mistake. There was a very, very old man there, pale and hairless, thin and breathing with great gasps, fast, asleep, seemingly near death. So I turned to find my dad's room. Then I froze. I suddenly realized, my God, that's him. I hadn't recognized my own father. It was the single most shocking moment in my life, of my life. Thank God he was asleep. All I could do was sit next to him and try to get past this image, before he woke up and saw my shock. I had to look through him and find something beside this astonishing appearance of a father I could barely recognize physically. By the time he awoke, I had gotten part of the way, but we were still quite uncomfortable with one another. There was still this sense of distance. We both could feel it. It was very painful. We both were self-conscious, infrequent eye contact. Several days later, I came into his room and found him asleep again. Again, such a hard sight. So I sat and looked some more. Suddenly, this thought came to me. Words of Mother Teresa describing lepers she cared for as Christ in all his distressing disguises. I never had any real relation to Christ at all, and I can't say that I did at that moment. But what came through to me was a feeling for my father's identity as like a child of God. That was really who he was behind the distressing disguise. And it was my real identity too, I felt. I felt a great bond with him, which wasn't anything like I'd felt as father and daughter. At that point, he woke up and looked at me and said, "Hey, hi." And I looked at him and said, "Hi." For the remaining months of his life, we were totally at peace and comfortable together. No more self-consciousness, no unfinished business. I usually seemed to know just what was needed. I could feed him, shave him, bathe him, hold him up to fix the pillows. All these very intimate things that had been so hard for me earlier. In a way, this was my father's final gift to me, the chance to see him as something more than my father, the chance to see the common identity of spirit we both shared, the chance to see just how much that makes possible in the way of love and comfort. And I feel I can call on it now with anyone else. The most familiar models of who we are, father and daughter, doctor and patient, helper and helped, often turn out to be major obstacles to the expression of our caring instincts. They limit the full measure of what we have to offer one another. But when we break through and meet in spirit behind our separateness, we experience profound moments of companionship. These, in turn, give us access to deeper and deeper levels of generosity and loving kindness. True compassion arises out of unity. All the more painful, then, are the moments in which we feel cut off from one another. When we reach out to help or be helped and don't quite meet. Despite the yearning of the heart, so often when we seek to care for one another, we feel far apart. Albert Einstein speaks to this question and to the challenge it poses to service. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole nature in its beauty. It is to ourselves, then, that we must first look in our effort to see what limits and spontaneous expression of helping instincts. How does who we think we are affect what we have to give? How does this delusion of consciousness, which separates us from the rest, narrow the range of our compassion? What different understanding of our being might nourish and deepen what we have to offer one another? All of us seem to be born into the experience of separateness. In infancy, we come to distinguish between self and other. As we develop, we arrive at our devise we arrive at or devise a complex group of ideas about who we are, our ego. This includes our identity on a variety of planes, which we function simultaneously as bodies, personalities, citizens, and souls. And we have many roles to play in the course of a single day, each of which is functional and tends to call attention to itself. Working a busy afternoon at the mental health clinic, we are more conscious of our professional identity. When we get home and see the children, we're most aware of ourselves as parents. Then the evening news comes on, and for a little while, we are responding to life, say as a liberal or as a conservative. The phone rings and it's our mother. Now we're someone's child. But that model falls away quickly enough as we prepare for bed. Notice that we're aging, wonder about our sex life, and drift off to sleep, perhaps anticipating tomorrow's task at the clinic. Hundreds of times a day, we shift costumes to fit appropriate roles. This is the life of the separate self moving through the world of other. For the most part, this model self or ego, with its individual attributes and roles, serves us in good stead. It preserves our physical and, to a degree, our psychological integrity. It gives us a sense of continuity through time, directing and documenting personal growth. It catalogs past experiences, making available our skills, helps keep track of capacities and limitations. Frequently, we relish or simply enjoy our individuality and sense of uniqueness. The freedom to define who we are is a challenge. As we acquire a certain degree of equanimity in self-image, we are that much more likely to feel empathy for those around us. We know what it's like to be a self moving through the world of others. When someone feels particularly isolated or in pain, we don't need a great deal of information in order to come to his or her aid. Our own experience of separateness guides us to appropriate understanding and support. Perhaps there are more specific parallels of experience. We too have gone through a divorce, uh, lost a loved one, struggled with alcoholism, or experienced a deliberating illness. a debilitating illness. From this body of common experience, much caring is born. As separate selves, we spend much time researching or reaching out to one another. Okay. Um, Yet, it is only fair to say that the quality of our helping sometimes suffers from the hold our sense of separateness might have on us. As happily and healthily as we may function within it, the degree to which we believe ourselves to be individual, isolated entities has consequences for how we care for one another. I canvass from door to door, looking for voter registration, volunteers, asking for just a few hours a week. Not a big job for someone, no great risk, and it can make a difference. That's what we believe anyway. What I usually get is a list of reasons why not. I'm busy elsewhere. I'd be embarrassed to ring someone's doorbell. What what'll I do with the kids? Things like that. I'll try to loosen up a little. Wouldn't you like to meet some new friends? Wouldn't it be nice to not be a mother for 3 hours a week? It generally doesn't break through. And the reasons why not usually sound, wait a minute. It generally doesn't break through. And the reasons why not usually sound a little hollow as well. Something else is at work. Operating from the model of the separate self, fear and caution may be the first response we notice that block the spontaneous expression of our innate generosity. In infancy, when the foundation stones of ego are developed and the world seems very big, our survival mechanisms are called into play very quickly. We feel powerless and vulnerable. And because these ideas are learned emotionally before reason and perspective are fully operating, they may be surprisingly resistant to change as we grow older. So perhaps we are a little wary of the world around us. However, much we might wish to reach out, kind of self-protectiveness buried within may still hold us back. Keep the doors locked and we'll be secure, says the ego. Our heart responds, but I'm not happy like that. To which the ego replies, better safe than sorry. We may feel a little nervous and tentative, even defensive about responding to the needs of others, particularly those in considerable pain who may who may make demands on us, whose reactions may be unpredictable, or who may indeed remind us of our own vulnerability. One response of the separate self to the impulse to help out then may simply be a reluctance or inability to get involved. We may also have to contend with inertia. An anxious, self-protective ego is most comfortable in a familiar role in which it knows exactly what's expected of it. At uh, this attachment, in the face of changing conditions or new demands, leads the ego to hold on to one model of identity, unless it has another equally comfortable one to slip into. It's reluctant to grow. which means opening to the ambiguity of the unknown and learning new roles. This clinging can hold us back from even the simplest actions. I'm just not the kind of person who signs petitions. Inasmuch we are caught up in any sense of personal inadequacy, we may wonder what we really can do for others. But even in these moments, in those moments when we're not fearful or tentative, because we often identify ourselves, consciously or not, with our shortcomings. We may feel that we don't have enough, that we just aren't enough to help meet the needs of others. We give very little because we feel very small. It's not that I don't care, I'm just sure you could find somebody better than me to do it. Our caution and sense of inadequacy may also lead us to cling to a private agenda that limits off full freedom and generosity of those helpful acts we can initiate. Insofar, we feel lonely, angry, or powerless. For example, our caring efforts may be largely motivated by the need to gain intimacy, vent rage, or win power. Catering to our own needs and expectations, we may be less likely to hear what others feel when they feel they really need. So we may be willing to give, but not, but our self-image has its terms. Even now, after years of experience, I'm very reluctant to challenge a colleague on a tricky diagnosis. It's a kind of dirty little secret in the medical profession. Everyone has a lot at stake. We all cling to our authority um, and persona. It becomes a sort of unwritten code among physicians, the license to do that. Very delicate stuff. And who pays, by the way? So frequently in our efforts to remain secure and protect the integrity of the separate self, we give greater weight to one aspect of our identity over another. Though we may acknowledge in the abstract that we are simultaneously physical, emotional, moral, political, and spiritual beings, we seem to cling to one dimension of our identity at the expense of the others. We specialize. As a consequence, however, we often end up shortchanging what we have to offer one another. I'm just a surgeon. You really ought to discuss your reactions to this experience with someone else. Why? What of the wellspring of compassion from which, or from having seen so many people go through similar experiences, patients? Thinking of ourself simply as a surgeon may cut off access to our empathy, potentially a source of great comfort and counsel. Or perhaps we think of ourselves primarily as a seeker. Oh, well, I'm basically a religious person. I don't have much to do with politics. Yet, by simply opening to acknowledge a fuller sense of identity, we might see that the very inner tranquility we may have cultivated in spiritual practice is precisely what is needed in social action. So often we deny ourselves and others of full resources of our being simply because we're in the habit of defining ourselves narrowly and defensively to begin with, less flexible, less versatile. We inevitably end up being less helpful. While some self-images are more likely to facilitate the expression of our compassion than others, it is also true that any model of the self, positive or negative, will limit our capacity to help. Each form we identify with, each role we attach to, is ultimately incomplete and transient. It can dissolve in a moment. A social worker gets fired, budget cuts, nothing open in the field. Now I can't even read the want ads. A therapist starts losing patients and fewer new ones come in. What's happening? Is it me? A model mother can't let go as her youngest child turns adolescent. I'm so depressed. My kids don't need me anymore. In any of those roles, who are we to who we or wait, in any of these roles are who we think we are. Social worker, therapist, mother. What's left when they fall away? Where's the rest of me? Even if we may momentarily be secure in our chosen roles, they can still impede the quality of our service at the deepest level. It's been chronically ill for 12 years. Or wait, I've been chronically ill for 12 years. Stroke, paralysis, that's what I'm dealing with now. I've gone to rehab program after rehab program. I may be one of the most rehabilitated people on the face of the earth. I should be president. Oh, I've worked with a lot of people and I've seen many types and attitudes. People try very hard to help me do my best on my own. They understand the importance of that self-sufficiency, and so do I. They're positive and optimistic. I admire them for their perseverance. My body is broken, but they still work very hard with it. They're very dedicated. I have nothing but respect for them. But I must say this, I have never ever met someone who sees me as a whole. Can you understand this? Can you? No one sees me and helps me see myself as being complete as is. No one really sees how that's true at the deepest level. Everything else is band-aids, you know? Now I understand that this is what I've got to see for myself, my own wholeness. But when you're talking about what really hurts and about what I'm really not getting from those who are trying to help me, well, that's it. That feeling of not being seen as whole. Implicit in any model of who we think we are is a message to everyone about who they are. It's not as if there are any real secrets. If we're really, or if we're only seeing one part of the picture about ourselves, positive or negative, that's all we'll be able to make real to anybody else. Caught in the models of the separate self, then, we end up diminishing one another. The more you think of yourself as a therapist, the more pressure there is on someone to be a patient. The more you identify as a philanthropist, the more compelled someone feels to be a supplicant. And the more you see yourself as a helper, the more need for people to play the passive helped. You're buying into, even juicing up precisely what people who are suffering want to be rid of. Limitation, dependency, helplessness, separateness. And that's happening largely as a result of self-image. So to identify with the separate self, however function it may often be, is to make this model of reality more real for everyone else. How much is this helping? And how much is it hindering? Perhaps we recognize the predicament. We see the problem of always having to be somebody. So we decide to let it all go, become the model of the humility, and to aspire to the ideal of selflessness. So one day, a rabbi in a frenzy of religious passion rushed in before the ark, fell to his knees, and started to beat his breast, crying, "I'm nobody, I'm nobody." The cantor of the synagogue, impressed by this example of spiritual humility, joined the rabbi on his knees. "I'm nobody, I'm nobody." The Seamus, custodian, watching from the corner, couldn't restrain himself either. He joined the other two on his knees, calling out, "I'm nobody, I'm nobody." At which point the rabbi, nudging the cantor with his elbow, pointed at the custodian and said, "Look who thinks he's nobody." So what's to be done? When there's too much somebody, it's trouble. But we can't make believe we're nobody either. It's enough to make you throw your hands up and quit. Time for humor and perspective. The least we can do is acknowledge or remind ourselves that this is part of the predicament of being human. We must all, or we all must deal with conditioning. The sense of ourselves as separate is what we're contending with virtually all the time. It's our curriculum, and everybody's enrolled. So, how do we get on with our course of study? As an intern, part of my work was to travel around in teams examining patients. I would notice their look as we entered: intimidated, apprehensive, feeling like cases of various illnesses. I hated that, but I was an intern. I remember one guy distinctively, however, who was altogether different. I think this guy changed my life. He was a black man in his 60s, very cute, very mischievous, and very sick. What brought us repeatedly to him was the utter complexity of his illness, condition on top of condition, and the mystery of why he was still alive. It was so strange. We were visiting not to find out what was wrong with him, but why he was still here at all. I had the feeling that he could see right through us. He'd say, "Hey, boys," when we'd come in, the way you might when a gang of 10-year-olds come barging into the house for a snack in the middle of the intense game outside. He was so pleased and so amused. It made some people nervous. I was intrigued, but for some weeks I never had a chance to be alone with him. Now and then he'd get into very serious trouble, and he'd be moved into intensive care. Then he'd rally to everyone's amazement, and we'd move him back, and we'd visit him again, and he'd say, "You boys are here again?" pretending to be surprised that we were still around. One night there was an emergency, and I took the initiative and went to see him alone. He looked pretty bad, but he came alert a few seconds after I entered. He gave me a grin and said, "Well," sort of like he expected me, like he'd known how much I'd come to love him, and that happens in hospitals. I imagine I looked a little surprised at the "well," but we just laughed a minute, and I stood there just so taken by who he was. And then he hit me with a single remark, half a question and half a something else. "Who are you?" he said, sort of smiling. Just that. "Who are you?" I started to say, "Well, I'm Dr." And then I just stopped cold. It's hard to describe. I just sort of went out. What happened was that all kinds of answers to his questions started to go through my head. They all seemed true, but they all seemed less than true. Yes, I'm this or I'm that. And also, but not just, and that's not the whole picture. The whole picture is the thought process went something like that. Nothing remotely like that ever happened to me, but I remember feeling very elated. It must have shown because he gave me this big grin and said, "Nice to meet you." His timing killed me. We talked for 5 minutes about this and that, nothing in particular. Children, I think. At the end, I ventured to say, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" He said, "No, I'm just fine. Thanks very much, doctor." And he paused for the name, and I gave it to him this time. And he grinned at me again. Really, he did. And that was it. He died a few days later. And I carried him, and I carry him around today. I think of him now and again in the midst of my rounds. A particular moment or a particular patient brings him back. Who are you? For years, I'd trained to be a physician, and I almost got lost in it. This man took away my degree, and then gave it back to me with, and also, and also, and also, scribbled across. I'll never forget that. How good it can feel to regain perspective. Our feeling of confinement as narrow, limited, isolated entities begins to dissolve as we take a few steps back and recognize who we are is this, and also, and also, and also. Moving in and out of these various identities, each is real. Only at the moment we are invested in it. A moment later, it may not be relevant at all. We see in other words the relative reality of these various identities, real only in relation to the situation which calls them forth. But if all our identities are only relatively real, coming and going as circumstances warrants, is there any part of us that remains steady and stable behind all our rules? If we observe our own minds at work, we see that behind all these identities is a state of awareness that incorporates them all and yet is still able to rest behind them. As we loosen the hold of each identity so that we don't get completely lost in it, we are able to remain light and loose, able to play among these various aspects of being without identifying exclusively with any. We don't have to be anybody in particular. We don't have to be this or that. We are free simply to be. To taste this freedom increases our flexibility immensely and enables us to be fuller instruments of service to others. For example, as a skillful nurse, we'll sense those moments with certain patients in which all the nurturing we've learned as a mother is needed. Or perhaps a situation arises, say, with an imperious physician, when who we are is simply a strong woman, one who's gained that resolve through the consciousness raising and insights of feminism, or in the presence of one who is dying. We feel that part of ourself, which is merely God's child. Humility, prayer, and faith are what we have to share now. So we often move among these various identities with much fluidity and skill. When we discover how exhilarating this is, what we're getting is just a taste of real freedom, the liberation that comes from loosening our identification with self-image altogether. We experience the versatility of our being and the independence of our awareness. We are opening up the window of our little homes and letting in a little cross ventilation. Humor also serves to support this awakening perspective. What else in the end do we laugh at but our own vanity and puffy attachment to who we think we are? The Marx Brothers have no respect, that is, for anyone who's busy taking himself seriously as somebody. Everybody's fair game. Groucho's cracks and Harpo's horn shake us all up. We sit there watching, laughing, loving it, grateful. How often we recognize ourselves in portrayals of human foolishness. How much freer we feel when a friend kids us about some quality of self-importance. And we're able to gulp, take it, and finally join in the general laughter. We come off we come off self-image. We're even able to direct this same irreverence towards our own behavior and attachments. I catch myself in self-importance 10 times a day. Check that. 5, well, maybe once. It's appalling anyway. A little flashbulb goes off and I'm exposed, like Jimmy Olsen caught Superman changing clothes in the phone booth. Of course, whoever I'm with has probably been seeing all the self-importance in me for hours before I even notice. And all my colleagues, they've been shrugging or giving up for years. So there's no sanctuary. And I've stopped trying to hide it. No, that's a lie. Don't trust this man. Don't print this interview. What I've really done is I've begun. I've just started to watch myself as I go through these little prances. I have this exercise I have sometimes perform. Or I have this exercise I sometimes perform. What I do when I catch myself being Mr. Administrator of Social Services is I get up out of my chair, walk away a few steps, stand for a moment, and then turn around and walk back and sit down again. The one who is now seated is usually not the same one who was there before. I'm no longer that guy, Mr. Administrator, for a while anyway. I should add that this exercise frequently appears quite mad to other people in the room, particularly if they're people who have come to me for some kind of assistance. This is the guy I've come to for help. Funny. So I perform those exercises in considerable cost to my aura of authority, you understand. But it's definitely worth it. Freedom is priceless, worth whatever the cost. With increasing perspective, we see that all of our ego identities, models, and self-images can be useful, but need not be entrapping. We may gain this perspective very slowly, but the direction is clear. As we lighten our attachments to self-image, we find a different vantage point from which to observe who we are. Um, it's as if you've lived in a little town and you go up to the mountaintop looking down and see you move about in the course of an ordinary day. You see your route to work, how you go shopping, the main thoroughfares, your shortcuts, your daily routes, your daily routines. You're seeing all that from up there. Then you return to the village, but now when you're moving around town thereafter, there's a part of you that always recalls the perspective from above. As you go through a day, you're still watching it all from up there. Sometimes, however, the process of breaking through attachment to our separateness happens simply because we've reached the boundaries of all of our roles and self-images. I gave it everything I had. I tried everything I knew. Nothing worked. Couldn't help. Perhaps we give up in resignation. The separate self, by definition, has its limits after all. But maybe we'll find another way. We'll surrender into the unknown. With nothing left to do, we let our heart and intuitive wisdom reveal another way to be. You might say that I'm the gatekeeper here, the first person people meet when they come in for help. My friends at work, they'll call up and say, St. Peter? I say, he's not here right now, but I can take a message. Or can I take a message? Anyhow, family services is the name of our department. People come in, I direct them to the appropriate office, food, shelter, child protection, welfare, legal services, your basics. My job is to get a sense of who someone is and then find the right place for them. Not simple. For a long time, I found this an uncomfortable assignment. I don't like sizing up someone according to their problem. I may help them get to the office, to the right office, but it also reduces them somehow, reduces me too. I'll find myself resisting this way of going about things. Um, but I had an experience which changed my way of thinking about it. There was this woman who was living on the street when I used to pass on my way to the bus. She was homeless, alcoholic. Later, it developed that she had a cancer diagnosis. For some reason, I decided to take up with her. I liked her smile, even or enough of sending everyone everywhere. I knew the whole maze of social services. I'd take her there myself. Clinics, shelters, Medicare, where, whatever, I guess. I wanted to know you could help one person yourself. She was very uncomplaining. Voila. She was willing, even funny about it. Well, Marie, she'd say, what are you going to do for me today? Oh, the scenes we went through. They called me once from the woman's shelter. Somehow she'd brought in 3 pints of Seagram 7 that night, and the group had gotten drunk. That was against the rules, and I had to take her out. You told me you'd be good, I said. You were warm there. She said, well, we got warmer. Oh, I set her up once with a counselor. After a while, he called. Look, she shows up irregularly, but she always wants to argue with me when she does. What she here for? And I'd tell Viola, and she'd say, sure, I'd love to argue with these people. He wants to talk about my childhood all the time, but he doesn't even remember what childhood was like himself. Trust me, Marie. And I did. I'd have to laugh. She was so insightful and honest. Oh, I really did love her, that one. I really did. But the problems went on for months. Nothing seemed to work out. She kept going back on the streets, drinking, getting sicker, all the rest. The more helpless I felt, the more I just loved her. What else could I do? And I'd try again. Look, Viola, I'd say. Look where, Marie? She'd reply. It it became a kind of joke between us. Look, look where. She moved to a park near my house, and there she started to really go downhill. One evening, I went to see her, and she was sitting under a tree. She looked awful. I had this powerful feeling that she was getting very close to death. So I went through everything with her one more time: her drinking, her health, her eating, her shelter. Uh, she could come live with me. I'd reach that point of willingness. She just listened, and finally she said, you know, dear, there's nothing you can do for me anymore. And I saw she was right. I just saw it. And I heaved this big sigh, just let go. About then, it started raining lightly. I finally said, well, it's getting late and wet. Shall we go get some coffee? She said, you go, Marie. I'll be all right here. And I said, yeah, well, I'll see you later then. But somehow it felt to both of us like I wouldn't. I went to the bus and I was crying on the bus. I felt just brokenhearted. I felt there was something else. I didn't know what. Then this thought came to me that she was out there alone in the rain. Just that. So I got off and took the other bus back and went into the park with a newspaper on my head. I must have looked pretty funny. She was under the tree. She looked up at me. I sat down. She said, what are you doing here? Nothing really. I just felt like sitting with you a little more. She said, okay. So we sat in the rain. There we were. It was relatively dry because this was a big sycamore tree. I told her about how my father taught me to identify trees by their bark and how I love trees and nature and felt happiest there. She told me about the desert. She used to live in Arizona. Her favorite place was the desert. It was so peaceful there. We watched the rain. We watched how the squirrels ran around and the last few people scurrying out. We watched how the park looked with no one in it. Some birds, a stray dog, some mist beginning to appear, and I felt finally at peace. And we were both at peace. And we stayed silent a long time. I felt such love. She walked me to the bus. She said, thanks. I said, for what? She said, for nothing. We laughed. You've been very good to me, she added. We were teary. We hugged. Then I got on the bus and we waved goodbye. I never saw her again. I'll always love her. When our models of who we are fall away, we are free simply to meet and be together. And when this sense of being encompasses all, one another, the park, the rain, everything, separateness dissolves and we are united in compassion. Helpful being then is the goal. What we have to offer others will come from our sense of unity. So we look for and cherish those experiences in which we feel ourselves connected to all things in the universe. Out under the stars, stretching to encompass notions of distance and galaxies, light years, until the mind just boggles and goes tilt. And suddenly your sense of specialness or separateness is replaced by a feeling of identity with the all-inclusive immensity of the universe. Listening to a Bach chorale and feeling transported into a sense of order and harmony far beyond the music itself. Harvesting the garden, smiling as you remember the spring planting, and appreciating the lawfulness of fruition in nature, the same life energy in you. So making love when you suddenly merge with someone very dear to become one, and you somehow feel more truly yourself than you ever had before. Or in service itself, comforting or a crying child, reassuring a frightened patient, bringing a glass of water to a bedridden elder. When you feel yourself to be a vehicle of kindness, an instrument of love, there's more to the deed than the doer and what's been done. You yourself feel transformed and connected to a deeper sense of identity. When I was working in New York with the elderly, poor Orthodox Jews, I'd come upon a number of old synagogues, dirty, filthy, and vandalized. I had always had ambivalent feelings about synagogues, a kind of no man's land for me. If anything, they made less sure of what it meant to be a Jew. But one day I came upon that somehow caught me. Or wait, but one day I came upon one that somehow caught me. That night I went into service. Very few people there, all down and out. And suddenly the thought came to me that I would clean the synagogue. Just that. And I did it. That's how it began. We'd bring in these young people to clean these synagogues, and in doing so, get a sense of what it really meant. Not just a social club, but a place where the entire life cycle of a people and their continuing relationship with God was to be celebrated. Myself, I found it hard to pray there, but that was the stage that I was at. But I helped bring a sense of order and beauty. You see, I had had an immense respect for that generation of Jews which had come to Palestine in the 20s and 30s, who went back to the land not simply to rebuild the land, but to be rebuilt by the land, by the work itself. That's what this became for me. This was a mitzvah, an act of service. But it was also an act by which I myself was being rebuilt into a deeper relationship with my tradition and my people and that living faith. Finally, profound moments of spiritual and religious experience take us beyond identification with our isolated egos. This sense of separateness falls away, and we come into deeper understanding of it all. While these experiences do not always easily lend themselves to words, the message of all the teachings that support them have much in common. Don't get lost in what's apparent. Go beyond the evidence of the scenes and the rational mind. Acknowledge that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies. Whatever else we may seem to be, we're also reflections or expressions of. And then we get the names for the nameless: awareness, being, God, life, formless, the way. Whatever it is, whatever it's called, there's only one of it. It's all present in all creation. We ourselves are rooted in it. It is our essence. Who we are from this perspective begins with one unity, not separateness, is our starting point. And while our ego doesn't disappear, its importance is certainly put in perspective as a result of having experienced a higher self. Whether these experiences through nature, art, love, service, spirit are frequent or rare, we see that when we are not caught up in self-conscious separateness, not defined by self-image, we will survive. Indeed, we thrive and function happily, freely, and efficiently. We feel exalted. Despite all our ego's concerns and warnings of dire consequences of not being somebody special, we are capable of simply resting in our being. We simply are. These geese have no intention to cast their reflections, and the lake has no mind to receive their image. Fortune cookie. The geese have no intentions to cast their reflections. The lake has no mind to receive their image. Fortune cookie. Ah, from this perspective, the whole question of identity can look very different. We can enter into the world of separate self with a certain amount of freedom, even irony and whimsy. As long as we're here, we might as well play. So, in a Seattle newspaper, there was a picture of a man behind bars. The caption explained that he had been caught with a dispatch case of full, or wait, in a Seattle newspaper, there was a picture of a man behind bars. The caption explained that he had been caught with a dispatch case full of papers and cards claiming various and different identities. The police had thus ascertained that he was none of these. The problem was that they couldn't find out who he really was. The man said, "They're the ones who arrested me. It's their problem to find out who I am. I know who I am." The police sergeant said, "This man has boggled our system." Tastes of self-transcendence draw us to further exploration. We recognize that these insights need to be cultivated. We may easily fall back into old habits and patterns of thought, but having come into contact with the higher self, we're motivated to find ways to strengthen our acquaintance. There are many paths, and each in its own way can help us to move beyond identification with the separate, isolated ego. To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. To be enlightened by all things is to remove the barrier between self and others. And that's Dojin Zenchi. We may choose to explore those forms of therapy that encourage us to understand just how our models of self have arisen through past experience. Earlier forms of psychotherapy seem to defy the ego by focusing on its genesis, invest in with more and more solid reality. Recent approaches of transpersonal, humanistic, and gestalt therapies, and those derived from Jung, encourage the liberation of the self and the exploration of a more expansive sense of identity. As we shall see in the subsequent chapter, the practice of meditation can help us to develop our ability to penetrate the process whereby the mind is constantly creating and reinforcing attributes of the separate self, ideas of me. We can systemically observe these ideas as they pass by, seeking to draw us into identification. I'm this, I'm that. But we can learn to remain mindful behind these thoughts, lessening our attachments to them as we watch them rise and pass away. Other traditions, in effect, we use the mind to beat the mind. In Rinzai Zen Buddhism, a teacher gives a student a particular koan to solve. For example, what was your original face before you were born? Of course, no rational answer is possible, but the student makes regular appearances to offer a response. Usually he comes armed with some artifice designed to make him appear wise and insightful. But these answers are quickly discerned as creations of ego and brusquely dismissed, and the student is rejected. This continues until the moment the student gives up in the effort to look impressive and a spontaneous answer just comes out. The teacher honors it, the student has forgotten the self. Some of us may experience the call to congregation and find ourselves drawn deeply to collective devotion and ritual. Whether in worship, formal ceremony, song, dance, or service, we experience the coming together of our many hearts. As joy and exaltation grow, our sense of separateness falls away. This becomes our path for strengthening our sense of unity. Or perhaps the experience comes through solidarity or through solitary interior prayer and contemplation. We lift up our hearts, minds, and souls. We reach out to God. Through our surrender, love, and faith, we feel a sense of profound communion in which our individuality merges into His being. In these moments, we are one. And though they may not last or retain their intensity, we're not likely to forget those moments when they happen. We seek them more often. All these methods and many others strengthen our ability to recognize and dwell in our higher self beyond separateness. In pursuing these practices, however, it's important to remember that the object is not to destroy the ego. We're not declaring war on one separate self or on our separate self. It helps to assure our survival and effectiveness. It has a role to play in an appropriate level of our lives. What we're doing instead is working to establish a new balance between the ego and the higher self and allowing our higher self to expand, explore, and root itself more fully in a consciousness of unity. Ramakrishna, the great Indian saint, likened the situation to a coach in which the driver, the ego, sits atop in command of the horses. The owner, the higher self, sits quietly within. Because the coachman has never seen the owner, he begins to think himself totally in charge. But when the owner makes himself known quietly but firmly, the coachman, perhaps begrudgingly, but ultimately in his best interests, relinquishes his fantasy and becomes content in the role of what? Of servant, it turns out. For then it responds more and more to the call of not my, but thy will. Not my, but thy will, O Lord. The ego finds joy and relief in attuning to a greater way of all things, to the larger harmonies of the universe in which it can find its proper place and need no longer be driven by the insatiable need to control. In surrender, in surrender to its proper station, the ego finds peace. The higher self is now freer to guide the work of loving kindness and compassion. The character of service also begins to change. Now there are two theories about crime and how to deal with it. Anti-crime guys say you have to think like a criminal, and some police learn that so well they get kind of a criminal mentality themselves. Hey, how I'm working with it is really pretty different. I see that man is essentially pure and innocent and one of good nature, but that who he is by birthright. And that's what I'm affirming in the course of a day on the job. In fact, that is my job. The cop part of it, well, they call us cops. To me, my job is I'm a peace officer. Now, it's interesting how this works. For example, when you are holding in thought a vision of our unity in good, you frequently spot a criminal motive arising or evident in someone. It's kind of a spiritual radar. Crimes can be prevented that way. I've seen that. And not only that, at the same time, I'm holding on to the view that such a person is complete already and doesn't need to steal and will provide and will be provided for from universal abundance. So I work not only to prevent that crime, but to eliminate its causes. Its causes in fear and greed, not just the social causes everyone talks about. Even when it gets to conflict, I had arrested a very angry black man who singled me out for real animosity. When I had to take him to the paddy wagon, he spit in my face. That was something. And he went after me with a chair. We handcuffed him and put him in the truck. Well, on the way, I just had to get past this picture of things. And again, I affirmed to myself, this guy and I are brothers in love. When I got to the station, I was moved spontaneously to say, look, if I'd done anything to offend you, I apologize. The paddy wagon driver looked at me as if I was totally nuts. The next day, I had to take him from where he'd been housed overnight to criminal court. When I picked him up, I thought, well, if you trust this vision, you're not going to have to handcuff him. And I didn't. We got to a spot in the middle of the corridor, which was the place where he'd have jumped me if he had that intention. And he stopped suddenly. So did I. Then he said, I thought about what you said yesterday and I want to apologize. I just felt this deep appreciation. Turned out on his rap sheet, he'd done a lot of time in Michigan and had trouble with guards in jail. I symbolized something and I saw that turned around, saw a kind of healing, I believe. So, what really happens if you're going to explore whether or not this vision of our nature really has power? Maybe people will say you're taking chances, but you're taking chances without any vision. Your vision is protection. Maybe they'll say you're sentimentalizing people, but it's not about people. It's about principle and truth. It's about how the universe is. Maybe they'll think it's idealistic. Things could never be this way. Well, for me, things are this way already. It's just up to us to know that more clearly. I see that my work is to hold an image of who we all truly are and to be guided by that. And I have been guided by that to greater strength and security within myself and on the street. What follows in the quality of our helping when we begin to know ourselves beyond separateness. Perhaps at the very least, we can be a little less fearful, a little more trusting when we break through the boundaries of self. We often find that we don't have to be as defensive as we might have thought or as might have been our habit. Things aren't inevitably pitted against us. If they appear to be, the possibility of harmony and reconciliation is a little more real. When we've had a taste of unity, we're that much more ready to bring it quickly into any situation at any given moment with anybody. We'll be more likely to take initiative and to reach out less self-consciously to those in need. Someone may be a little shy asking for help, and we ourselves may be a little tentative offering it, but we can overcome these boundaries more quickly because we've already been working to see that they're not inevitably so solid. How many times, after all, do we initially hold back with one another, only to laugh when we finally break through the caution and meet openly and freely? How long it takes for this to happen depends entirely upon how much we're coming into these situations. Feeling separate, what's to prevent us from meeting in compassion instantaneously? The more we're able to take such initiative trustingly, the greater sense of range and possibility we're likely to have in our efforts to help out. We might feel more patience. We'll work longer and harder with a retarded child or someone in physical therapy when we have more confidence that there are sources of support beyond ourselves. Something may happen. Someone may come along, a moment of insight, a flash of inspiration, a new source of energy. We're more trusting of the universe because we have experienced nourishment in those moments when we felt at one with it. Being less cautious will be more likely to take risks in the expression of our helping instincts. Perhaps in the midst of a grim situation near a family sickbed, head shaking, brows all furrowed, we'll take a chance and say, "This is quite a soap opera. We're all stuck in here." Now maybe they'll throw us right in out of the room. That's how much of a soap opera it is, but maybe it'll just be what is needed to break the tension. Maybe a few people will be able to come for a moment's air, see the horizon beyond the next wave, remember the big picture, and then uh, take a deep breath before plunging back in the midst of it all. We've succeeded in interrupting the soap opera for a brief public service message, worth a try anyhow. At the very least, we're seeing that we can stretch ourselves, go beyond what's familiar, trust our instincts a little bit more. All this is possible because we're not so firmly wed to models of ourselves and how we're supposed to behave when we're seeking to help one another. Less afraid that reaching out threatens our own well-being, we're freer and more venturesome in expressing our caring instincts. As we approach other people in the spirit, we'll also be more likely to communicate that we have what we have in common rather than what divides us. Knocking on someone's door with a petition protesting utility rates, we won't have to meet as righteous activists and reluctant housewife. Maybe we'll get engrossed in the smell of the soup inside as the door opens. Um, we'll begin talking recipes, talking grandparents' recipes, talking grandparents, and then almost as an afterthought, oh, by the way, I had this petition. I don't know about your utility rates, but ours, oh yeah, ours too. I don't usually get involved in this stuff, but sure, right. Where do I sign? As we become less identified with any single aspect of the separate self against one another, we're freer to know which among them all is most appropriate for a given situation. It's as if we can be anyone to anyone, resting behind all roles, and we can also be, as it were, no one to no one. That is, we can create a space where whoever we're with has the best chance to come out from behind their self-image. No costumes, no disguises, come as you are. The awareness that allows us to rest behind the ego, moreover, also gives us a far greater ability to listen to others, to hear what's really needed. Our intuition can guide our actions. The universe is filled with information. Answers are inherent in questions. The less our mind is busy feeding the ego, the more we can allow our spiritual radar to come into play. The more we tune into one mind, our work to move beyond the separateness may also strengthen our sense of abundance. We feel like we need less because we're coming to see just how much we'll always have access to. We don't have to ration our helping acts quite so carefully. We needn't constantly measure just how much we'll be able to offer before we get depleted. We don't have to feel as if we are sacrificing by giving. Beyond separateness, service replenishes. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. In turn, our helping actions will be less directed by the ego's personal agenda and need for constant reassurance. We won't be entering into service so much to gain intimacy, purpose, a sense of usefulness, and so on. We don't need to go anywhere special to attain these. They're in us already and available all around, simply as we understand our interrelatedness with all things. Our service, then, is less a function of personal motive and more an expression of spontaneous, inappropriate caring. We're not so much helping out then, because it's me needing to tend to you. We're helping out because it's us. The more we understand and dwell in that truth, the more we serve simply in the way of things. If one of us needs help, if one of our arms gets caught in a door, naturally we use the other of our arms to set it free. Helping happens not because it's been weighed and considered. It happens because the barriers to its lawful and automatic expression have fallen away. And finally, what of those moments when we question whether we're anything useful for others? What do we really have to offer? What do we really have to give? Everything, it turns out. Everything. If within us, if within each of us is that essence of being, which is in all things, call it God, life, energy, consciousness, as open to all that as we are in ourselves, so we have it to share with one another. What could that mean practically as more than a lofty abstraction? It could mean that when we're holding a frightened, battered child, or hearing the grief of a total stranger, or bandaging the wound of an enemy soldier, or sitting with a dying friend, they can feel in who we are. That reassurance that they are not simply isolated entities, separate selves, lonely beings cut off from everything and everyone else. They can feel us in there with them. They can feel the comfort that we are all of us in this together. They have the chance to know in moments of great pain that nevertheless we are not separate. When all else fails, when we've done what we can, we still have this essential reassurance to offer one another. It comes as each of us moves beyond attachment to separateness into a greater sense of unity. To be enlightened by all things is to remove the barrier between self and other. So that was chapter 2. Already forget who's helping. So thank you, everyone. Let me put my what appear to be the same glasses. All right. So as we prepare to leave this and each of our digital sanctuaries, we offer our deepest gratitude to the co-creators and pioneers who continue to sustain this space. Your service is a living prayer. We dedicate the merit of this gathering to the journey of every soul present as you return to your individual path. Remember that your greatest act of seva is the kindness that you show yourself. May you continue your self-seva with the same devotion you give to this group. We release the stories shared here into the vault of confidentiality. We leave the roles of helper and helped behind, returning to the simplicity of being. Go gently, knowing you are never truly walking alone. Namaste, Ram Ram. And to our foundational co-creators, there is a specific kind of bravery required to build a bridge that has never existed before. By combining the teachings of loving awareness with the principles of international peer support, you didn't just start a group, you initiated a shift in how our two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, and plus community experiences spirituality. We thank you for your vision, seeing the intersection where our identities and our souls meet, your courage, navigating the grist of organizational growth with a quiet mind, and your self-seva. For every hour you spend in meditation, in therapy, or in nature, because that inner work is what makes the outer work possible. You've taught us that to love, serve, and remember is not a burden, but a joy when shared in mutuality. We honor your path, we celebrate your service, and we stand on the shoulders of your love. One love, everybody. Ram Ram. I've been Angus Wright. I still remain Angus Wright, and I also go by Angus by design. If this resonates with you, please visit ramdas.org and follow your nose. It always knows.
But again, it's where passion comes from. If passion comes out of what I call milking the drama, or it comes out of identifying with the emotions, I think it's short of what the possibility is. There is, for example, what's called Dharmic anger, where a Zen monk will beat his student out of the incredible amount of love and compassion he has. I would say that if you're deeply enough in love with the universe, then the passion that arises out of it is different than if you aren't. And I think the passion is a passion that comes out of a joyful involvement in the universe. But I think it's the passion of a river or a tree. I don't think it has to be very, although it could be.